Thanks everyone. Great pleasure to be here. Really for us, we're a bit of a newbie to all of this. Noosa's certainly got a lot of attraction, so it's very good to introduce you to the Jaguar nickel sulphide project. And as the sort of covering slide says here, we will be the next sulphide mine globally. We've made an enormous amount of progress on this project over the last couple of years. And hopefully through the course of this next 15 minutes, I can give you a good flavour for that and what that investment opportunity really looks like. So Jaguar, as it stands right now, inside Centaurus Metals, is a Tier 1 nickel sulphide deposit. It has a resource of 1.2 million tonnes of contained nickel metal, so 138 million tonnes at around about 0.87% nickel. All the feasibility study work that we've done to date is showing us that we've got a 15-year open pit project before we consider anything from underground activity. And with that, we will generate very strong cash flows, which makes our market cap look quite pitiful. But we are in a funding phase. We understand where we're at right now. We've got the debt and equity ready to roll out, and we're still looking to make the investment decision by the end of September. So we're very, very close. And I'll talk to some of that as we go through. All the key permits are in place. We've got the environmental licenses. We've got the mining lease. We really love being in Brazil. We think it's a fantastic jurisdiction. And there's probably a lot more companies that have gone there in the last couple of years, whether it's lithium, rare earths, etc. But Brazil really has become a favourable destination for ASX-listed companies being able to pick up projects. And you know, it's a country that is underexplored. Access to capital from the Aussie markets is opening that up, and I think there'll be a lot more opportunity and you'll see a lot more projects coming onto the ASX in Brazil. There's been some offtake work, we're doing the funding work, got non-binding indicative term sheets on debt. We're looking to close that out over the next couple of months. We're getting very close with that, and we've got a fantastic footprint from an ESG perspective based around having access to renewable power. So Brazil is a location, a country that has great mineral endowment. It's a huge country, as big as Australia, but really, really is underexplored. So you've got a system that works, exploration licenses, mining leases, no government participation other than royalties. So very much a system that we're used to and that we can have confidence in. The environmental approval process is well documented, spelt out, and we've been able to work through that process in a very orderly fashion, such that we've really got all of our key environmental approvals within the space of a couple of years. The strategic minerals, critical minerals part of the economy is growing enormously. The government of Brazil is doing an enormous amount to promote that part of its industry. And I think we've been able to really leverage that with groups like the National Development Bank, BNDES. Where we're located in the northern part of Brazil, we avail ourselves to a 15% tax rate. You know, it's considered a more remote region, but as I'll show you through some of these slides, we really are in part of an industrial hub, which is known as the Carajás Mineral Province. But one of the things that really drives home our position and our ability to have continued to develop this asset over the last few years, while nickel markets have been really tough, is the fact that our all-in sustaining costs are low, driven by the fact that we've got access to power on the grid based on renewable sources, principally hydro. So our power is really around about 4 cents a kilowatt hour. Compare that to Western Australia, you might be at 25 cents a kilowatt hour on a good day. So all of those things go into being quite favourable, and Brazil being an amazing destination to develop a new nickel sulphide project. There's a snapshot of where we are. We've got a good board with a broad range of experience. But I guess what I'd just draw you to here is the guy in the middle of the page. I made him a bit bigger than the rest of the board because I still think he's probably the most important person to our organisation right now. And this is a guy by the name of Tiago Costa. So he's come on as project director in April. He is a project builder. He's the guy that gets on the ground, manages the costs, manages the schedule, and he's delivered before in this region. So if you look at the Carajás Mineral Province, you've got what you might call the eastern province. You've got mines like Salobo, top of page, which is Vale's biggest copper mine, the biggest copper mine in Brazil. Middle of the page, you've got S11D, which is the largest high-grade iron ore deposit globally, pumping out about 90 million tonnes a year of iron ore at 65%. And then as you move further to the west where we are, Onça Puma is a ferro-nickel operation of Vale. They've just expanded that, spent $500 million on it, taking it out to about 40,000 tonnes of nickel. And right in that bottom sort of corner there's a project called Boa Esperança, now called the Tucumã project, which was built by Aero Copper. And Tiago was the guy that built that project. So that's a 4 million tonne copper float plant. We're building a 3.5 million tonne nickel float plant. He did that for about $340 million US and did that in 22 months. So we're saying to him, go and rinse and repeat, go and get that project, do it again. Anything you didn't quite get right, let's fix it on our project. And so he's got all the connections. He is local. I don't need to employ an expat. He knows all the contractors, and more importantly, he knows what all the costs need to be. So it's like, I get us a price from a contractor. No, that looks wrong. Fix that. And so we're going through all of those processes right now, and the amount of momentum that we've got in the last 3 months since he's joined us has been amazing. Just looking at that map there, one of the important things is, is this going to work? Yep. Sorry, come around this way a little bit as I talk to that briefly. This is a 230 kV power line that runs out to the Onça Puma ferro-nickel operations. And that for us is key. So that gets us onto the national grid with a very steady state transmission. It gives us power at around about 4 cents a kilowatt hour. So we'll connect in there, we'll run a spur line out there about 40 kilometres to join into our project. That's all been built in as part of the capital cost. So very good place to operate, not many people around, generally farming country, cattle grazing country. So for us, great place to be building a nickel project. Nothing special about this, just the pits in the middle of the screen in the gold, they're about 3 kilometres of strike. So this is a large ore body. We will be mining a lot of mineralisation out of here over the next sort of 15, 20, 25 years. And there, as I said, it's a very simple flotation circuit. There is nothing overly complicated about what we're trying to put together. So I'll dive into each of these in a little bit more detail, but importantly, we're ready to go from a licensing point of view. The resource and the reserve are a large scale. It's one of the few projects that really does have that scale about it from a new nickel sulphide project. CapEx was sitting at $380 million last year when we did the feasibility study. Maybe a little bit of escalation, so we sort of work in and around that number. And the work that Tiago is doing, I'm very confident that we still come in around that capital cost as we launch into FID. $4.43 per pound for nickel. All-in sustaining costs on a payable basis is what really sets this project apart and puts us in the bottom end of the cost curve. And I'll show that cost curve in a little while, but that really does play to our strengths and why we've been able to continue to work through this project while the supply has come from Indonesia and prices have been depressed. We're now seeing some changes in Indonesia. We're now seeing that price beginning to re-rate, and we're looking to capitalise that as we launch in the project. So environmentals have been done. We lodged an environmental impact assessment. We've got that approved. That was the preliminary licence. We've got the installation licence, so we can actually build the plant that we've designed. That's available to us. As soon as we've got funding, we can get on the ground and do the work. The mining lease has been granted. The environmental licences for the power line route have been granted. And last week or the week before, we've got the approval from the transmission line operator for our 20 megawatts of power. So all of those things are there, and it's really about a funding regime right now, and I'll come to that. The resource, very well drilled out. 1.2 million tonnes contained. Of that, there's about 1 million tonnes sitting in the measured and indicated category. We hit mineralisation as close as 5 metres from surface in fresh sulphides, and we've hit mineralisation as deep as 1,000 metres. It's these east-west running zones, vertical ore bodies, but we've got very good drill core information. We've drilled about 200,000 metres of diamond core, which goes with the 50,000 metres of diamond core that was in the project when we acquired it from Vale. This sort of graph there just sets out where we sit. So we've got size, but we've also got grade, particularly when you consider the open pit nature of what we're talking about. It sits with all of the other camps globally. It's So this is really an exceptional project when you're looking for nickel sulfides. Of that resource, we've converted 400,000 tonnes into reserves. As I said, 15 years of open pit operations, doing about 20,000 tonnes per year. Sort of starts around 22.5, sort of back half maybe around sort of 18,500 before we look at what we do from the underground, but a very conventional open pit mining operation. Process-wise, we're producing a very high-grade nickel concentrate. It's a 30% concentrate. We can achieve that because the nickel sulfide we are dealing with is what they call a millerite. It's not a pentlandite. Most ore bodies globally in nickel sulfides are pentlandite, but because of millerite being very high tenor nickel, we're able to produce a concentrate that goes over 30%. That pays into the logistics, so we don't need to move a lot of concentrate around the globe, and it just means that we can keep those operating costs in check. So that's where we sit on the cost curve. Down the bottom end, that's super important to us. We can compete with Indonesia, we can compete with all the laterites, and we know that if prices do fall, that we're always going to be able to compete. So if you look at the nickel price over the last 20 years, and that straight line there is our costs, we're going to be last man standing. So it's really about now getting through the funding, doing all the work that we need to do, and we can look to bring this project on stream. It's a quick snapshot there just of the production profile. Bottom slide there is, or bottom half of that slide just sets out that 22,500 tonnes a year dropping down, and so that year 8 and year 9 is that point where I think the underground will come in. You can sort of see there, there's some areas, there's about 300,000 tonnes in contained nickel metal sitting in the resource. Of that, there's 230 measured and indicated resource, and we think that we can convert some of that. We've done some internal studies to demonstrate that there's more mineralisation to come from the underground, and we can feed that into the production profile. And here's a look at the cash flows over a period of time. So this is where I just pull it back to where our market cap was, sitting at about 250 million bucks. At the long-term price we used here, we'd make about 170 million bucks a year over that first 7 years. If we're using today's price, it's probably a little bit lower, maybe at around about 140, 150 million US dollars. So once we've actually got the funding, got the cash, and we're generating that, then our market cap's going to be much higher than where we are today. Offtake, we've got a great arrangement with Glencore. We're working on another offtake now. We're hoping to get some strategic equity coming with that offtake. Hopefully have some news out of that over the next month or so. And then really looking to close out the debt funding piece. So the debt now is with the ITEs, they're doing the work, we're going through all of the processes, and we'd expect to have credit approved term sheets by the back half of September, and which was when we would launch what we need to do with the equity and pull everything together and make that investment decision. So we've given Tiago 2 years. Once we make that investment decision in September, there's a lot of things to go on. We've started some early stage on-field work, if you like, and that is all coming together. The momentum is really building. I won't touch on the copper project today, I'm running out of time a little bit, and you can sort of see, because I get very wound up and passionate about our nickel project, but if you do want to come and talk to us about the copper, we can come and see us at the booth. But I really encourage you to have a look at Jaguar as a new nickel sulfide mine. We think it's a fantastic opportunity. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Darren.